Okay, so this is the last section of the biological basis of behavior. It's 3C, reading 103 to 110. This is specifically looking at the evolutionary aspect of the biological approach, the biopsychosocial. This is looking at how evolution impacts our biology. So evolutionary psychology, what is it? It tries to explain what makes humans similar based on the traits that have been passed down. Behavioral genetics, explores the genetics tools of human behavior. It explains the specific tools or genes of an individual. Evolutionary psychology tries to explain how all humans maybe have these specific traits that are passed down. Evolutionary looks at natural selection, which is the principle that among the range of inherited trait variations, those that lead to increased reproduction and survival will most likely be passed down to succeeding generations. They seek to understand how natural selection has shaped our traits and tendencies. So the whole goal of humans is survival. So what has kept us alive? Evolutionary psychology talks about the genes selected during our ancestral history provide more than a long line of important traits. They endow us with a great capacity to learn and therefore adapt to life in varied environments, all the way from the tundra to the deserts to jungles. Our adaptive flexibility in responding to the different environments contributes to our finesse and our ability to survive and reproduce. Evolutionary psychology points out that sometimes we have mutations in our genes, which are random errors and replications. Sometimes they're very hurtful, and they can help. They can be a trait that's causing an illness, but sometimes these traits can be more beneficial. It looks at evolution across cultures. We have similar emotions among the human race, and we will talk about the different emotions that are passed down. One is happiness, right? Another one is probably anger, and we do have those traits for not only happiness, but maybe anger was for a survival instinct. Different tastes have also impacted evolution. Most people avoided spicy and bitter foods because they saw those as dangerous. And think about how women during maybe their first trimester often get nauseous, so they stay away from bitter, spicy, really flavorful food because they don't want to get sick. And that's kind of the same thing to consider, like way long ago, they would kind of avoid those foods because they wouldn't want illness. Sweets and fats were often hard to come by, so when they did have them and they did receive them, what they used them for was they were preparing for long famines in the future. Now we can see that we're still in favor of sweets and fats. However, sweets and fats aren't really providing us much use in survival due to the fact that we do have a very adapted lifestyle now. We don't need those to run and to hunt and to stay alive. So biologically preparing themselves for a world that's not existent is kind of what we're doing to ourselves with the fats and the sweets. Evolution's explanation of sexuality, they did do a study and they wanted to see are men and women more, who thinks about sexuality more, and over in the surveys it was more often men. Evolutionary psychologists have studied mating preferences in natural selection as well, something that we've instinctually have in us when we're looking for a mate. Men often look for women instinctually who are young looking, and that probably ties back to these are the women that can carry or bear their children. So maybe not even thinking about it, most men will gravitate towards a woman who looks younger. They look healthy, they have smooth skin, they have a youthful shape. They actually did tests on very similar women in terms of their appearance, and most men would pick women whose waists were 1/3 narrower than their hips. And men maybe might not even realize that, but it's probably because instinctually something in their gut is telling them that they can bear children. I know, very odd, very random, but we have these characteristics in us that we're not even aware of. Women, however, most often look for a mature, dominant, bold, and affluent man, somebody that can protect her in case of danger. So we look for somebody who's kind of like that protective figure most often. Now, this is just They've done studies on this. This isn't the only way or the only reason we look for the opposite sex. Criticisms to evolutionary perspective, it did talk a lot about that in your textbook. The biggest one here, it does not take into consideration any of your social aspects or your environmental aspects that make up a person. Now kind of recapping at the end of the bio unit, let's look at the bio perspective in deep. The biological, behavioral genetics, and evolutionary. We studied a great deal of the biological unit and how that impacts us as individuals. We looked at the structural elements, we looked at the neurons, the neurotransmitters, the brain structures, the nervous system, the endocrine system, and how all of those elements can impact your behavior. We just spent some time in the last presentation looking at how behavioral genetics, your genes, your chromosomes, your genome, heritability can impact your behavior. It's another component. And lastly, we kind of talked about natural selection, food selection, mating preferences, instinctual traits, emotions, can all be something that's evolution, and that's how evolution has impacted us. Looking at all of these different aspects, there's a lot that goes into a human's individual's behavior. So to kind of recap, we talked about evolutionary psychology. We looked at cultural, sexuality, and criticisms of evolutionary psychology. And then I recapped kind of the biopsychosocial approach.